God is our refuge and strength, an ever-present help in trouble. Therefore we will not fear, though the earth give way and the mountains fall into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam and the mountains quake with their surging. There is a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy place where the Most High dwells. God is within her. She will not fall. God will help her at break of day. Nations are in uproar. Kingdoms fall. He lifts his voice. The earth melts. The Lord Almighty is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth.
We're always delighted when people want to become part of our church family. And it's my privilege to introduce such a new family among us. I want you to meet the Hallsells, Roger and Jan. Would you guys mind standing up? Welcome. Glad you're here. You can see we already put Roger to work, and he was willing to jump right in, and we appreciate that also. I believe that we can normalize a way of doing life outwardly that at times can be toxic to who we are inwardly. We're thinking about our inner being. We're thinking about our soul. It's that part of us that is internal that makes us us. It is part of what is meant for God to redeem. And what we are on the inside is meant to be with us throughout all eternity. God wants to transform us. And he wants to renew us day by day in the likeness of Jesus. And that begins in one's soul. And so, given all that's going on outside, throughout the various things that are buzzing around us in life, it's important for us to take stock of how we're doing on the inside. And so I've been asking you, how well are you doing renewing? The mental health of Christians has been a topic that is often overlooked, and I think for too long. We're trying to do something about that in this church, and that is part of the motivation for why I wanted to try to talk about the nature of our souls, the well-being of my internal self and your internal self is very important. And in case you haven't picked up on the connection before, I can be the kind of person that other people need me to be, the kind of person who can bless others. First of all, I have to be a spiritual person on the inside. I have to be spiritually healthy internally before I can really be the kind of person that other people need. I begin by asking you in this series if you were ready to get well. If you were ready to be able to stand up and sing in all honesty, "It is well with my soul." And last Sunday I talked about whether you were willing to make a commitment for the biblical principle of rest within your lives, because that is something that nourishes your soul. That's the way God designed us, to need regular rest. And it's silly for us to overlook that. This morning, I want to ask you if you're ready to get still. After a lifetime of trying to find that sweet spot in life where I have all these external expectations that people want me to fulfill, I've always realized that it's important for me to do some things on the inside if I'm going to have something worth offering on the outside. I can't be the kind of person that endeavors to minister out of a dry well. And that means I have to take time for soul care. And I'm not the only one. All of us are like that. I believe a soul cannot heal until it gets still. And so I ask us to listen to our Creator who said, "Be still and know that I am God." So in 1956, Naval Aviator Test Pilot Tom Atteridge was testing his new F-11 Tiger jet off the coast of Long Island. He ascended to 20,000 feet, broke the sound barrier, and shot off his 20 millimeter cannon on his plane, and then immediately dove to 7,000 feet, where he shot himself down. He actually had gone so fast that he caught up to the bullets that he had shot, and they hit his plane. And he was barely able to bring it in for a crash landing. Now, there was a big uproar and a big military investigation, and they concluded that the chances of this happening again are so small. It's billions to one, and so we never have to really worry about that happening again. 1973. Air Force pilot Pete Purvis, he got into his F-14 Tomcat off the coast of California. He fired a Sparrow missile at Mach 2. He was supposed to be shooting at a target floating in the ocean. He missed that, and his missile came back and hit his plane because he was going so fast. Now, it was a dummy missile, but it still caused him and his weapons officer to have to punch out, and the plane, worth millions of dollars, crashed in the ocean. There was another investigation, and they said the odds of this happening are so small that it's something that we never really need to worry about. 2019. A Dutch pilot on a NATO exercise off of the coast of the Netherlands was supersonic in his F-16. He shot over 500 rounds from his plane's Gatling guns, and 100 of those rounds hit his plane. Finally, the commander of NATO said, "Flying faster than a speeding bullet is not always a good thing." Now, I don't mean to sound like the Military History Channel, but here's the point. We are now at that stage where we are building fighter jets that go so fast that they can cause self-harm. I'm wondering if you can think of any way you can apply this to your life. Some of us can be our own worst enemy. We can try to live at a supersonic speed, going all the time, and never able to get all the things that we think we should get done, but we need to watch out. Because if you go too fast for too long, you actually make it easier for you to shoot yourself down and to crash and burn. I love Lynn Anderson. Well-known preacher, writer all around the world. I don't know why exactly. He's about 15 years my senior, but he took me under his wing. He mentored me a good portion of my life. And when I was with a large church in Houston, and it was the kind of thing where I could never complete the list of all the people that thought they needed me to do something for them. I could go 24/7 and I still wouldn't get to the end of the list. I felt like I was drowning. I felt like I was in a constant state of burnout. I felt like I was taking my family down with me. And Lynn turned to me and said, "Kid," he said, "you're not going to be like Jesus unless you ruthlessly protect your time so that you don't have to live a hurried life." Not hurry? I mean, there was all this stuff to do and not enough time to do it in. How was I going to do that? And he said, "Well, I don't know. You're going to have to figure that out. But this I know. Your soul cannot heal until you create space in your life to regularly be still." And that was so important for me. You see, Jesus modeled the importance of stillness and regulating the pace of his life. There was never a more important life lived on this earth. His time was short. His purpose was enormous. And yet everywhere Jesus went, he walked, except for that one little donkey ride on the way to the cross. He didn't run from place to place because he had so much to do. He walked. He had a lack of hurriedness. In fact, he was sometimes criticized for his lack of hurriedness. And yet, all Jesus had to do was save the world. And when we think about our goals for this week and the things that we think we need to get done and the things that we intend to try to get done, is the lack of hurry one of our priorities? I'm not talking about being lazy. I'm not talking about being in a perpetual state of, well, I don't really care. But the idea that no matter how important the things we have to do are, we still need not to become so rushed that it is to the detriment of our spiritual being. You see, Jesus relentlessly protected the time he needed for his inner self, for his soul. And I think we need to learn from him, and I just want to mention a few things this morning. Number one, being still allows us to edit our lives in view of our purpose. What is your primary purpose? Who thinks about that, you might ask? Well, Jesus did. And his sense of purpose was always with him. It was always on his mind. And that's important. And if you don't think much about your purpose in life, maybe that's why you've had trouble sometimes not being so hurried. Purpose and pace are things that really go together for a Christian. You see, Jesus, he couldn't heal everybody. He couldn't teach everybody. He couldn't save everybody. But what he did was take advantage of opportunities as they came on his way to the cross. And there was nothing that was going to create a detour for him on the way to the cross. And so he had this sense of more important things and lesser things. Things that would be good to do, things that he would certainly take the opportunity to do to bless people as long as they were consistent with his purpose. And so when we are hurried and swamped, what are the things that we most likely jettison? I'll tell you, I've had some experience at this. When we get rushed and we have this long list of things we got to do, what are we most likely to jettison? Time with our family, time with our spouse, time with God. And the reason we do that is because we think all those people are willing to forgive us the most. They are the most likely to cut us some slack. They are the most likely to forgive us for our neglect. And it turns out that in reality, these are the most important things in all of our lives. At least that's what most of us would say. There's not many of you who would say there's something more important than your family. I know you. Or something more important than your relationship with God. And yet that is what you are quickest to jettison when you're hurried, if you're anything like me. I love the passage from John chapter 13. This is basically the beginning of the last week of Jesus' life. It is what takes him up to the cross. And in John 13, you find this simple passage, John 13:3. Jesus knew that the Father had put all things under his power, and that he had come from God and was returning to God. And so he got up from the meal. He took off his outer clothing and wrapped a towel around his waist. And after that, he poured water into a basin and began to wash his disciples' feet, drying them with a towel that was wrapped around him. Do you get that? Knowing where he came from, knowing where he was going, the most meaningful thing he could do in that now was to wash some disciples' stinky feet. That was an opportunity that was before him. But he did it with a complete sense of perspective and purpose. And a lot of times I have found that missing in my life. You see, one of the things about working with churches, and I mention this I don't want you to feel sorry for anything. It's just kind of a normal sort of thing. The more you do for a church, the more things you do, the more people you help, the more you take care of stuff, the more congregations will let you do it. And in fact, they'll even talk about how hard you work, even though you may be crumbling before their very eyes on the inside. And I think not because I'm just getting older, but I'm trying to get smarter. And you don't have to worry about me being lazy. I hope you know I work hard for the cause of Christ at this place. I am going to be there for you in the face of a crisis. You can count on me. But even though I'm busy and I'm trying to be about a sense of priorities that matter, what I don't need are a lot of other people thinking up good stuff for me to do. You see, when you see a need, when you see something that should be happening, if this is a healthy church, we are the kind of group where you want to do something about that. And you say, well, I don't have the skill, I don't think I can do that. Then you pull together some others who can help address it. I'm not going to be anybody's roadblock. I really work hard at not trying to tell anybody no. I'm here to root you on. But if the church is going to function like it needs to, it cannot be preacher-centered. It's got to be Christ-centered. And people who have the gifts of God's Spirit all have the capacity to do some good thing to bless others. And you don't need anybody's permission here to do something Christ-like for others. We just need you to do it. And the same thing's true for your workplace. You think your workplace benefits by the fact that you're willing to do everything for everybody? No. Nor do you. The same thing's true for your family. And so, I know this sounds just a little complicated, but I'm just going to say it. What I try to spend a lot of my time on is thinking of what is the 20% that I could spend 80% of my time on that will make the biggest difference possible. What's the 20%? If I did that, it would have the biggest impact, and I'll give 80% of my time and ability to work on that part. I can't do everything or be everything to everybody. You have a crisis, I'll be there. For the first few days and the first few weeks, I'll check on you every day. I'll see what I can do for you in every way I can think of. But I probably can't do that for 3 months or 6 months because I have 4 or 5 more crises that are waiting to get on stage just off the side. And yeah, there's a little bit of firefighting when it comes to public ministry. You go to fire, to fire, to fire. But it was never meant that just the elders or the ministry staff, that they be solely responsible for everything that goes on here. Parents, Christian is not the one who's primarily responsible for the spiritual well-being of your children. He'll help you, he'll support you, but that job is the job of parents. And sometimes when we hire a youth minister, we hire a different staff member in church, well, then we say, don't have to worry about doing that anymore. I'll give it to them. And that's not the way churches are supposed to function. There is a time for a compassionate no. Now, like I say, I work hard at not trying to tell anybody no, but every once in a while I have to tell people, this sounds good, I would like to do this, but right now, because of the commitments I made in other areas, I'm not going to be able to do that right now. And I hope you understand. And let me try to find some other people who can help with that. Now, I guess you could say, well, that guy's not doing his job. If that's the way you want to look at it. But I learned a long time ago, and I learned it the hard way, that if I don't have something to offer on the inside, it doesn't make any difference what I do on the outside. And so it's important for us to be people who can edit our lives. It's only when we slow down that I believe we catch up with God. If you're going to find the sweet spot of a godly pace of life, then all of us from time to time, we have to do some pruning. I can't do everything that I would like to do. I have to prune. What's the most important thing? What's the main thing? How can I get others involved in these other things? Those are the kind of questions you need to be asking yourself. Time to edit. Secondly, being still allows us to remember how much God cares for us. Jesus says in his most famous sermon, I get it why pagans are always running around after stuff. I get it why they're always running around about what they're going to eat and what they're going to wear and where they're going to live and what's going to happen tomorrow. And I understand how they're running into worry here and there because they're so concerned about things. Jesus said the reason they do that is because they don't know God. And so in Matthew chapter 6, verse 32, Jesus says, "For the pagans run after all these things, and your heavenly Father knows that you need them. But seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well. Therefore, do not worry about tomorrow, for tomorrow will worry about itself." And so when Jesus reminds those that he is teaching about how God cares for the birds and for the lilies and all the other stuff, the inferred question is, why do people who believe in God run around like pagans after such things? Don't you know that God's in charge? Focus on the kingdom. Focus on the kingdom first. Focus on doing right first and foremost, with what little control you have over the situations of life. Psalm 62. David writes, beginning in verse 5, "Yes, my soul, find rest in God. My hope comes from Him. Truly, He is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I will not be shaken. My salvation and my honor depends on God. He is my mighty rock, my refuge. Trust in Him at all times, you people. Pour your hearts into Him, for God is our refuge." When the 12 went out on their first missionary journey, and they came back in Luke chapter 9, the very first thing Jesus does is He takes them away just to spend some time with them, just to listen to them talk. I believe because He wanted to give them an opportunity to talk about the good things that God was doing through them. And in that you remember that God can be trusted to do good things. One of the best parts of a mission trip in Nicaragua is at the end of each day to sit on that veranda in one of those rocking chairs or whatever, and just to listen to people talk about their day and how God moved and how God blessed. In Luke chapter 5, verse 16, you have a passage that occurs many times in the gospel. It says, "Jesus often withdrew to a lonely place and prayed." Can you have the courage to fast from going fast? That's what I'm asking. I mean, if you will try to slow the pace of your life down just to create more space to be with God, if you just do that for a week, your soul would thank you. The Prince of Peace needed some peace and quiet. So which one of us would say, we don't need that? And the third thing I want to mention is that being still means to prioritize the greater things over the lesser. I imagine you've heard this before, but our biggest problem as Christians a lot of times is not knowing the difference between right and wrong. That's usually pretty easy for us. If we're honest, we know what is right and we know what is wrong. But the greater challenge is between the good and the better. Now, that's tough sometimes, particularly if we want the good and maybe don't want the better as much. But that is the kind of challenge that we must deal with in the tangle of our soul on a daily basis. I love the passage in Luke chapter 10. Here is Jesus. It says in verse 38, Jesus and his disciples were on their way, and they came to a village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. Now you know what's coming. She had a sister called Mary, who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said. But Martha was distracted. Now that's a Bible word. I mean, that's not Mary saying that. That's not Martha saying that. But the Bible said Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to Jesus and asked, "Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me out." "Martha, Martha," Jesus answered, You are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed. So, indeed, only one thing is needed. Mary has chosen what is better, and it will not be taken away from her. Could it be that all those things that make you busy, all those things that you rush around to accomplish, all those things that you have allowed other people to expect you to do, really are just distractions? Would Jesus describe them as essential busyness, or you're getting distracted? Mary chose the most important thing, spending time with Jesus. And it's important that we consider that. What is the focus of your soul? How can you help maintain a healthy soul? I know that everybody here this morning would say they really love God. I know that. But there's a difference between saying you love God and prioritizing Him over other activities and opportunities for busyness in our life. I don't know of anyone in the Scripture that runs with God. There's a lot of people who walk with Him, but no one who runs with Him. Attention requires intention. Back when a lot of my lifestyle was so destructive to my family, there was a time my oldest son, I don't know, he was like 10 or 11, and he's jabbering away, and I'm over here, over there, I'm thinking about some other stuff. Obviously, my mind's not fully on the conversation. He takes my face. He moves it over toward him. He said, "Don't move, I'm talking to you." And he was right. And some of us, instead of just glancing every which way, taking time just to focus in on that which is the most important, is so crucial to our souls. I normally, at the end of our worship gatherings, pray over you. But I want to do something just a little bit different this morning. I want to ask you to reflect on praying yourself. And in fact, I've written a little prayer. It's going to be on the screen here in just a sec. And what I want you to do is take just a moment, and you may want to pray this prayer. You may want to simply allow it as a guide to praying about this in your own life. But I want us to take just a couple of minutes to think about this idea. Dear Lord, help me to live slowly and quietly enough to experience you fully and love each other deeply. Please still my soul. Would you take just a moment to think about it and to pray?